The first time she said it, I thought I had misheard her. $1,200. A month just to see my grandson. I remember the way the room felt smaller, like the walls had quietly leaned in to listen. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to, it just sank. Slowly, heavily, like something inside. Me already knew this moment had been coming. And the worst part? My son didn't say a word. I've never been the kind of mother who clings. When my son Daniel got married, I told myself something very simple. Step back. Let him build his own life. I had raised him to be independent, kind, thoughtful, and for the most part, he was all of those things. He used to call me every Sunday. Not out of obligation, just because he wanted to. We'd talk about small things, what he cooked that week, how work was going, whether the old car I refused to replace had finally given up on me. Sometimes we didn't say much at all, but there was comfort in the silence. When he met Ava, I was genuinely happy for him. She was confident, polished, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people straighten their posture without realizing it. She worked in finance, spoke quickly, smiled politely. At first, I mistook her distance for shyness. I remember the first dinner I hosted for them. I spent all day cooking Daniel's favorite dishes, things he used to beg for when he was younger. When they arrived, he hugged me the same way he always did, warm and familiar. Ava offered a brief smile. "Smells nice," she said, glancing around the house as if she were mentally cataloging everything. We sat down to eat, and Daniel laughed more than usual. He seemed eager, almost performative, like he was trying to prove something. Ava barely touched her food. "I don't usually eat carbs in the evening," she said lightly. I remember apologizing, even though I wasn't sure what I had done wrong. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table when she wasn't looking. A small gesture, reassuring. At the time, I told myself every marriage has adjustments. When they announced they were expecting, I cried. Not because I was surprised, but because suddenly everything felt full circle. I had raised a child, and now he was going to raise one too. I offered to help in any way I could. Ava smiled that same careful smile. "We'll see," she said. Daniel hugged me again. "I'm glad you're here, Mom." Those words stayed with me. After my grandson Leo was born, something shifted. Not all at once, just gradually. At first, visits were frequent. I'd come over, hold Leo while Ava rested, help with small things around the house. Daniel would thank me over and over again. "You're a lifesaver," he'd say, and I believed him. But Ava started setting boundaries. "Let's keep visits to once a week," she said one afternoon, adjusting Leo's blanket with precise movements. "We need our own routine." Of course I understood, or at least I tried to. Then once a week became once every 2 weeks. Then, "We'll let you know when it's a good time." I told myself not to take it personally. They're new parents. They're overwhelmed. Give them space. Daniel's Sunday calls became shorter, then occasional. Then, silence. The first real crack appeared over something small. It was Leo's first birthday. I had spent weeks preparing a gift, not something expensive, just something meaningful. A handmade photo album filled with pictures of Daniel growing up, alongside the few photos I had of Leo. A story, a connection. When I handed it to Ava, she flipped through it quickly. "Oh," she said. "That's thoughtful." But her tone didn't match the word. Later that evening, I overheard her speaking to Daniel in the kitchen. "We need to be careful about boundaries," she said quietly. This is exactly how it starts. I wasn't meant to hear that, but I did, and something inside me tightened. After that, everything became structured. Visits required notice. Calls went unanswered. Messages received brief replies, if any at all. I tried not to push. I really did. Because love, I had learned, sometimes meant stepping back, even when every instinct told you to move closer. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had just finished watering the plants when my phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "We need to talk." Simple, direct. My hands felt cold as I typed back, "Of course. Is everything okay?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Come over tomorrow at 3. No explanation, no warmth. Just instructions." I barely slept that night. My mind wandered through every possible reason. Was something wrong with Leo? Had I done something to upset her? Had I crossed a line without realizing it? By morning, my chest felt heavy with questions. When I arrived at their house the next day, Daniel opened the door. He looked tired, not physically, something deeper. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping aside. No hug. That alone made my stomach drop. Ava was already seated at the dining table, a folder placed neatly in front of her. A folder. I remember thinking how strange that was. We weren't discussing business. We were family. "Please sit," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Daniel stood nearby, leaning slightly against the wall. Not sitting, not speaking. Just there, present but distant. Ava opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, organized, structured. She slid one toward me. "I've been thinking a lot about expectations," she began, "and what's sustainable for our family moving forward." I blinked, trying to process her words. "I'm not sure I understand," I said. She nodded as if she had anticipated that. "You've expressed a strong desire to be involved in Leo's life," she continued, "which we respect." Respect. The word felt misplaced. "But," she added, "that involvement needs to be balanced with our time, our energy, and our boundaries." I glanced at Daniel. He avoided my eyes. Then she said it. Calmly, clearly, as if she were discussing something entirely reasonable. "I think it's fair to establish a monthly contribution, if you'd like regular access to Leo." For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand what she meant. "A contribution?" I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, $1,200 per month. That would allow for scheduled visits. Consistent time and flexibility on our end." That's when the room changed. That's when everything inside me went still. Because suddenly I wasn't sitting across from my daughter-in-law. I was sitting across from a stranger. I turned to Daniel, waiting, hoping, say something, anything. But he just stood there, silent, eyes lowered, as if the floor held all the answers he couldn't give me. And in that silence, I felt something break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a thread that had been stretched too far for too long. I looked back at Ava, at the folder, at the number printed clearly on the page. $200. A price for time, for love, for my grandson. I opened my mouth to speak. But in that exact moment, Daniel finally lifted his head and said something that made everything even worse. Daniel finally lifted his head and said something that made everything even worse. "Mom, maybe we should just hear her out." I don't remember breathing after that. Not properly, anyway. It felt like the air in the room had turned thick, like something I had to force into my lungs instead of something that came naturally. I stared at him, searching his face for something familiar. Some trace of the boy who used to call me every Sunday just to ask how I was doing. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. And that was when I understood this wasn't just Ava's idea. Or maybe it had started that way. But somewhere along the line, Daniel had agreed. Maybe quietly, maybe reluctantly, but he had still agreed. And that silence of his, it wasn't confusion. It was permission. "I don't need to hear anything else," I said softly. My voice surprised even me. It didn't shake. It didn't rise, it just existed. Calm, controlled, like if I let even one crack form, everything else would collapse with it. Ava tilted her head slightly, as if she hadn't expected resistance. "I think you're reacting emotionally," she replied. "This is about structure, about fairness." Fairness. I almost smiled at that. "Fairness?" I repeated, looking down at the paper again. "You're asking me to pay to see my grandson." "It's not like that," she said quickly. "It's about respecting our time. Child care, scheduling, the emotional labor." "Stop," I said, raising a hand. Not loudly, but firmly. Because if I let her keep explaining, she would turn this into something reasonable, something logical, something that made sense on paper, but felt completely wrong in the heart. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite what this was. I stood up slowly. My legs felt steady, even though everything inside me wasn't. "I have never asked for anything from you." "You," I said, my eyes shifting briefly to Daniel before returning to Ava. "Not money, not favors, not control." Ava said nothing. "I showed up when you needed help," I continued. "I stepped back when you asked for space. I respected every boundary, even when it hurt." Daniel shifted slightly, like the words were landing somewhere he didn't want them to. "But this?" I gestured lightly toward the folder. "This isn't a boundary. This is a transaction. The word hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ava closed the folder with a soft, deliberate motion. If you don't feel comfortable with the arrangement, she said, her tone cooling, then we'll have to reconsider access altogether. There it was. Not loud, not aggressive, but clear. A condition, a line drawn. I looked at Daniel again. This time, I didn't search his face for answers. I just waited, because this was his moment. His chance to say, this has gone too far. His chance to choose something, anything that resembled the son I thought I had raised. But he stayed exactly where he was, silent again. And something inside me settled. Not healed, not forgiven, just settled, like the moment you stop hoping for something to change because you finally understand that it won't. Okay, I said. Both of them looked at me surprised. Ava's expression sharpened slightly. Okay? I nodded. Okay, I repeated. I understand. And I did, more than they probably realized. I reached for my bag, picking it up from the chair beside me. I won't be paying to see my grandson, I said, my voice steady. And I won't argue about it either. Ava opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance to respond. But I want you both to understand something very clearly. Now Daniel finally looked at me, really looked. And for the first time since I had walked in, there was something in his eyes, not defiance, not agreement. Something quieter, something uneasy. Love doesn't disappear just because you put a price on it, I said. But it does change. I let that sit for a second. Not as a threat, not as a warning, just as truth. I hope, I continued gently, that one day, when Leo is old enough to ask questions, you'll be able to answer them in a way that makes sense. Ava's jaw tightened slightly. Daniel's expression shifted. But neither of them spoke. I walked toward the door. Each step felt strangely light, like I had set something down without realizing how heavy it had been. Halfway there, I paused. Not because I wanted to stay, but because something inside me needed to say one last thing. I would have given you anything, I said quietly without turning around. If you had just asked with love. The words lingered in the space between us, unanswered. Then I opened the door, and I left. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic. I don't remember the turns. I only remember the silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful, the kind that echoes. When I got home, the house felt different. Too still, too quiet. I placed my bag on the table, then sat down slowly in the chair by the window. The same chair where I used to sit during Daniel's Sunday calls. I stared at my phone for a long time, half expecting it to ring, half hoping it wouldn't. It didn't. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that. Weeks passed. And in those weeks, something unexpected happened. I stopped reaching out. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But because, for the first time, I realized that every connection I had been holding on to had only been held together from my side, and I was tired. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in soft gold, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. My heart reacted before my mind could catch up. I picked it up quickly, opened it. It was short. Just one line. Mom, can we talk? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering just above it. So many thoughts rushed in at once. So many questions. Why now? What changed? Was this about me? Or something else? I didn't reply right away. Instead, I set the phone down gently on the table, and for the first time in weeks, I let the silence stay exactly where it was. Because something told me, whatever he was about to say next wasn't going to be simple, and it definitely wasn't going to be easy.